Hello and welcome to another episode of Workplace Wizards podcast. I'm your host, Arnell Smalley, and I'll be joined with another co-host in just a few seconds here. And today we're going to talk about the word fairness. We're going to talk about that word fairness. So let's bring in our co-host. Alrighty. Sorry, technical difficulties there, Gavin.
You forgot my name. That's what happened, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what it was. How you doing today, Gavin? How you doing?
I'm okay. I feel a little bit, I'm not sure how I feel about that. You're forgetting me, but yeah, it's good to be here, buddy. How are you?
Good. I'm glad that you're here, Gavin. I'm glad that you're here. But last week we talked a little bit about, cultural humility, and when I was in Thailand, and I was explaining to you, and I think we talked about on the podcast also, where when we were in Thailand, it was so many different ethnicities and cultures and race and everything. I mean, there was everyone. I mean, I talked to people from Switzerland, I talked to people from Denmark, I talked to people from Germany, I talked to people from, all these other countries, and we're all sitting around the pool one time, and we're just having these conversations, and I said, man, look at this. This is cultural humility. This is cultural humility. And the way we were treated, every single person was treated the same.
Okay.
Every single person was treated the same. And I thought that was one of the most remarkable things that I have seen, because just not too many places where you've been where every group of people is from a different country.
Yes. And when you say treated the same, were they treated the same or just valued? Because do we treat people the same?
That's a good question. I would say when I say treated the same, meaning that everybody was valued, everybody was welcomed, everybody was, it was like a pleasure for them to have you there. That's the treatment I felt.
Yes. And can you imagine having that feeling in the workplace? So someone comes to work,
let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Well, just how powerful would that be?
I mean, that's the whole point. When we talk about we titled this one called Fairness, Gavin. So what does fairness mean to you?
Well, fairness is for me, I find the concept of fairness really interesting, because actually when you look at it, there is some subjectivity to what fairness is. I think I've just come off the screen. So yeah, there is some subjectivity about what fairness is, but I'll come back to that. But essentially, of all the values that we have, fairness is one of the strongest, which really gets one of the most emotional responses in people. Because when you think about it, we are all pack animals. Humans are pack animals. And essentially, when you go back, the only way to survive was really to share. Okay, you share food, you shared labor, you had to share in order to survive. And what the brain has developed is that if things are perceived to be unfair, the brain sees it as a threat. Okay, and as a threat, it will always deal with things emotionally. Whereas the brain actually deals with fairness, perceived fairness, as a treat. And therefore it's seen as a good thing. So there is something very primal in terms of how we deal with fairness. Okay, so it's a really powerful one. And whenever you talk to people about work and when they've been unhappy at work, I will guarantee that most times people will say or give an example where they felt they were treated unfairly.
Okay. So
back in the past,
you talk about fairness in terms of inclusion. So basically, and they say to feel like you're included is to feel like you're valued, to feel like you're part of the team.
Yes.
Not being treated unfairly.
Yes. And so that value is to be, you have the same value as everybody else. And what you contribute could be different, but you're treated with the same value. So that's what people want. So, but the difficulty with fairness is that it isn't created equally. It's not fairness for me, might be different for someone else.
Right.
And, a very basic example, if you go through a job interview, and some people are going to pass and some people are going to fail. Now, people that fail could argue that it's unfair, but the people that pass say it's fair. Okay, so sometimes it's a little bit about perspective. So you can't always please everybody, because what's our perception of fairness? Okay. But what we've got to understand is that people do have different perceptions of fairness. And that's what I think is quite a good discussion today, is about actually with all these different cultural differences. It's not just cultural, it's about, culture could be based on many different things, but from where we come from, how do you make sure that people come to work in that environment, and we can create that environment that you experienced out in Thailand, where everybody feels valued and then want to contribute and actually engage in work.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about here. Oh, I shouldn't say here because you're not here, but let's talk about here in our workplace environment. Let's talk about our workplace environment, and what are some of the ways that an individual can contribute to making people feel valued.
Yes. So in terms of, it depends what angle you're going to come from, but in terms of treating people fairly, which will then give you them value, people need to understand, particularly around decisions, why decisions were made. So there needs to be an element of transparency about decision making. And we also want to know that decisions have been made with some degree of logic and data. Okay. Because actually sometimes I might perceive that something should happen, but if someone can actually explain to me, well, actually, this is the reality, these are the facts and figures, this is why I've made this decision, I might not particularly like it, but I will understand it. And therefore, for me, it becomes less of a threat, so I can understand, and and my logic will then take over, and I can deal with that better. And that means that I can actually carry on contributing to the team, because actually I don't feel less threatened about or undervalued. Sorry, I feel less undervalued. So in terms of how we create a fair environment is quite important, because, as I say, fairness is different from different perspectives.
Right.
So it's a lot of it is about decision making and how we make our decisions, which impact on our teams.
Mm-hmm. All right. When you talk about decision making, now we're talking about a little bit about emotional intelligence.
Yes.
And we're also talking about human behavior styles. And when I talk about emotional intelligence, and when you talk about decision making and it comes to emotional intelligence, how are you as a manager reading the room? How is your empathy towards your coworkers and your subordinates? Are you empathizing with them? If you make a decision and it doesn't sit well with an individual, are you empathizing with that individual to find out what it is that doesn't sit well with them and how they feel? Or are you trying to put yourself in their shoes for just that moment and understand and realize that, hey, the way you may have said something kind of rubbed somebody the wrong way?
Yes. And I think it goes back before that decision, is to understand, if you understand your team before you make decisions, you'll kind of know before then. It won't be a reactionary thing. It'll be I understand my team. I know what makes people tick. I know what makes them upset. I'm going to have to make this decision, but I know they're going to probably respond in this way. So I need to do something about that, because I still want to maintain that correction with them.
Now, with that being said, Gavin, you talked about that. Didn't we discuss that previously when we talked about our human behavior styles? If you're we talked about this. We talked about this. So we understand that there are buttons that will push
that's right.
certain people in certain ways. And there's also ways to motivate individuals that may not be a motivation to a C. You can't motivate an I and a C at the same with the same words.
Yes. And that's a really good point. So when we make decisions, understanding how different people will react, then how to deal with that. But I think crucial for me is about, do you really know your staff, and actually do know how they're going to how they're likely to respond to what's happened or what you've done or decisions you're going to have to make. Because otherwise you're just generalizing your behavior. Okay, and that becomes a bit hit and miss. So it might work for some people, but it might not work for others. So the key around good leadership really is to be agile and understand that you do have to flip between sometimes different styles and sometimes different behaviors depending on who you're dealing with. Now, sometimes you can do that.
You have to be able to adapt your leadership style to deal with certain individuals.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
That don't see things exactly the same way that you do.
Yeah, and I think when I look back on my career and look at other people who were really good and effective leaders, they're probably they are the ones that knew when to adapt. Okay, knew when to be supportive, knew when sometimes they need to be a bit more directive, but they knew that they knew when to change, but also how to change.
Oh yes.
The people that are less effective are the people that just have one style, regardless of situation or people, and that's just their go-to. Now that might work some of the time.
I was gonna say, let's not knock it down, because I guarantee you that will probably work. Let's say, for instance, you're dealing with all D's. You're dealing with these in law enforcement. We're dealing with a lot of D's. Majority of the time, it's a D. And let's say, for instance, when I talk about our SWAT teams or something like that, those are your high D's, and the ones that they really want to go at it and they want to do that. You don't have to adapt your leadership style if you're leading in a D personality way, because majority of your team is all D's. And the ones or two that aren't D's, they know what they're in for. They already know what. So you don't have to adapt your leadership style, because you're dealing with the same type of personality in the people that you're leading.
Yes, absolutely.
But it doesn't, like you said, but it doesn't always go across the board, because you can't use that same leadership style when you're dealing with the general.
And also, I think your example of the SWAT team is quite a good one, because when they're doing their job and they're dealing with an incident, they will be very task focused and they will get things done, and they've got the well-trained people, I assume, over there. And so they're kind of, it's routines. But actually, there's lots of times about leadership when they're not doing that. Part of your leadership role might be you've just restructured the department. Now, how are you going to impact on your SWAT team, who are suddenly all impacted by all this change and transition? And so therefore, it's a different environment. It's not about getting the task done. It's about, how am I going to survive now? I've got all these things happening in my life, this structure. How's that going to affect my pay? Does that affect my duties or all those different things? So actually, there's different parts of, even with these specialist departments, there could be times as a leader, you've got to manage them in a completely different way, because it's a completely different scenario, different environment.
Ooh, Gavin, that was deep. I loved it. And with that, hey, we're gonna cancel it, because people need to pay us for this kind of work. This kind of work.
Is this free? Is this free? Seriously? Is this free?
No, the check's in the mail, Gavin. You didn't get that? I sent it to you. Check's in the mail. Check's in the mail.
That's right.
It's probably held up in the tariffs.
Yeah, I know. It's a long pond. It's a long pond between us. It's a big pond.
It is, and it's on a rowboat, so it'll get there.
It's gone every way. Yeah,
it'll get there. It's just going the Asia route.
Brilliant.
But hey, Gavin, I definitely enjoyed this conversation we had today, and this is Workplace Wizards podcast, and we just want to say thank you guys for joining us, and stay tuned, because we have so much to give, and there's going to be some changes here, so we're going to have to make some changes, and I guess I'm going to have to adapt my leadership style to see if I can bring Gavin along with me with all these changes we're going to do. So look forward to seeing you guys in the next episode, and for now, we're going to say goodbye.
Goodbye.